Welcome to the week, everybody. It's me and Chuck today. Chuck and I today. Woo. Chuck and myself. Jared's gone. He's on some island somewhere.
With Mark.
He's on island time.
With Mark's honeymoon.
Are they both there right now?
Yeah.
Are they on the same island, though?
Yeah.
They are?
Yeah. Same.
Oh.
I think it's the same resort.
No way.
Yeah.
What a nightmare. Jared didn't get invited to the wedding, so he's like, I'm going to come to the honeymoon. You want to have a private honeymoon with your new wife? Psych, your boss is going to be there.
Well, handsome Jared's
He's
just
going to be walking by. It's that guy with his shirt off. It's Jared. Mind if I sit next to you guys? Mind if I get some drinks on your tab? Yeah, just put it on Mark's tab.
Mark's tab.
It's fine.
The
he won't care.
honeymoon room.
He's there. How was your Mother's Day, huh?
Yeah, it was great. Jen wanted like a super chill day, so that's what we did. We're in like the new spot on the west side, so we just walked down.
Congratulations.
To Cafe Brazil.
Nice.
For some
wait
food.
5 hours for food? Or?
Dude, I was actually surprised. I was like, I don't know, this is always my like, is the economy slowing down thing when like Cafe Brazil's not a 30-minute wait. Well, it was like a 5-minute wait and we were like right in. I was like, that's not good for that doesn't seem good for the economy.
It might be speeding up though. Jenny called me this morning. She said, hey, she never calls me in the morning.
Yeah.
I got good news. I'm like, what? And I guess they lifted the temporary suspension on the tariffs from China specifically. Yeah. I know we were talking about our
90 days
coffee bags.
I know our bags and everyone, right? I imagine the vast majority of people in the coffee industry were feeling some kind of monetary pain from that.
Yeah, that was a fun text message to get at the end of last week. Hey, we got to figure out this bag situation because the company we use isn't even. I mean, they're based out of Hawaii,
right?
But everything's coming from there.
From China.
Everything's just pass it on.
Yeah,
that's cool. So Cafe Brazil was chill.
Yeah,
nice.
Yeah, it was chill. The kids they had some cute presents from mom.
Aww.
Got some flowers.
Aww.
Call it a day.
Nice.
Yeah. What about for you guys?
Super mellow. We went to Jenny's sister's place and just did dinner and brunch. Her kids watched Eleanor. So we all went out as adults. Perfect. I saw my mom at the coffee shop earlier in the morning, watched my nephew play baseball.
Eleanor was still alive when you got back?
Everything
the kids
was fine.
Are like 6 years old watching Eleanor?
No, her youngest is 11.
We left her with a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old.
11 and 16 or 17.
Oh, all right,
so one of them's a full-blown, maybe even older than 17. Yeah, she drives. Yeah. The older one drives.
Right.
The younger one's young but still responsible. So we felt good. And where we were eating was... Man, maybe 4 or 5 blocks.
You'd make a run
from where they were. Yeah, you could just blast around the corner. Super easy. So that was pretty cool. It was just mellow.
Yep.
And then I went climbing the next day.
Well, how are your hands?
They're fine.
Feel?
They're fine. I had like a bunch of arm pump at the time.
Yeah.
Jenny's brother-in-law was Thad. You've met Thad.
Yeah.
Every time I've been over there recently, because he's been climbing for about a year.
He's a climber.
About a year under his belt, and his friend owns the gym, and he's always like, you gotta come climb. You want to come climb? And he finally wore me down because I don't like heights. So I'm just like,
with you.
All right, let's go. So I went, and it was fun. It was super fun. I could see how it could be addicting.
Yeah. Did you get up there?
So I went on some smaller walls, which are still, I don't know, they're like 25, 30 feet up in the air. And yeah, I made it to the top of a couple of them.
You were like 5 feet up. You're like, I'm good.
So my first one, that's exactly what happened. My first go, I got about 5 to 7 feet, and I tapped out. I was like, nope, get my ass down from here.
Because coming down is always the harder part. Than
I'm
going
not
up.
into it, because my body just didn't like it.
But you were like tied into where like you're like 30 feet up. You can like rappel down.
Yeah.
You're not having to
It's not dangerous.
Climb down.
No, I didn't have to climb down. No, it wasn't bouldering. I was strapped in. Like he was belaying me or whatever.
Yeah.
But the first one, I don't like tall things. So I'm just up on this wall. And I was like, I got to get out of here. So I went down and I just kind of stared at the wall for a second. And then I was just...
Put your game face on.
I was like, fuck it. And
let's go.
This is like some basic ass wall that these little girls are climbing. You know what I mean? It's still tall.
Dude,
but
look, little kids have no fear though. So
I know. They don't have fear, and they have no concept of what...
Of like what?
Yeah, the implications of they're like, I'm fine. I'm fine. So I made it up to the top of that one, and I was pretty hyped. And then did a slightly more advanced one, made it up to the top. I was stoked.
You're like Tom Cruise, like hanging upside down in
100%, dude.
Mission Impossible.
I was more like Stallone and Cliffhanger.
Oh, there you go, one-handed.
Just
Just
one-handed.
one-handed.
It was fun though. And then the second, I tried some even more advanced, taller ones, and then it didn't work out. I got kind of halfway up, and I'm just not used to being up there still.
Oh, yeah.
So I was fine. And then once I would have tunnel vision,
Right.
and I'm like, okay, cool. I'm like here, and then I'd have these like moments of awareness where I would just realize how high I was off the ground, and it's like, I got to get out of here.
Yeah, for me, like the just
get me down.
that vertigo feeling kicks in. I'm like, no bueno.
So if I go back, I'll probably do it again.
Yeah.
And then I toyed with the idea of doing it in Santa Cruz, and I'm like, no, I don't want to hang out with those people at all. Hard pass, dude. I've been to Pacific Edge. See
There's
what goes on in
one,
there.
yeah, agility. Well, we're going for a 8-year-old's birthday party on
Agility.
Sunday.
Jared
Agility
takes
boulders.
the girls to agility, I think.
I've never been.
Anyway, try climbing if you're a strange hippie with terrible hair.
Strong forearms.
Or where I was at Alpine, it was just normal, awesome people. Everyone was very friendly. Not in Santa Cruz. But yeah, that was it. That was my weekend. Had some good coffee. And yeah, it was great. Okay, we got some questions. We got a question from Ben. Ben's essentially asking, well, play the question, Wiser. Thank you.
Hey, this is Ben in East Palestine, Ohio, and started my cafe roastery in 2015, and finding Baca's videos on YouTube was a huge resource, and all of the just information you guys put out in general has been amazing for me to share with our team and help guide our mission and vision, values, and kind of growth. We're ready to put more focus on our wholesale partner program. We roast for our cafe and a couple area cafes and businesses, and trying to see if you can put together a little bit more information about the financials of that aspect, similar to how you've shared the financials on the cafe side of things. That would be great. So just some kind of roastery, maybe goals as far as percentage breakdown and financials. I know things aren't going to be exact moving from area to area, but just maybe some general parameters to strive for as we take those next steps and hopefully expand our roastery and partner operations. Thanks. Keep up all the good work.
Yeah, so Ben wants to know about roastery P&L, roastery finances, in
Yeah,
the
and I
way
didn't know
that we
if
talk about.
you also wanted to know, like, kind of building it out, what the cost would look like.
Oh, he didn't say that specifically. Like how much for a roaster, how much for a
Yeah.
space, how much for et cetera, et
Because
cetera.
the cost of that seems like it's really been going up in
Yes.
recent years in terms of getting a machine, what kind of machine you want to get.
How much volume you're going to do. Because it's when we were opening, the co-roasting thing was very, very small. Now it seems like it's much more common for people to do whatever they can do to not buy a roaster and not lease a space. And
As a roaster, you're getting up into like, I don't know, what, 50 grand for like a, I don't know, 15 kilo
that's
or more.
pretty close to what we paid, but I'd probably
Gotta
say
be
it's
more,
more by
right?
now. Yeah. I mean, with all the accoutrement and the installation,
Yeah.
it's like you're going to spend 70 to 100 for something of that size, don't you think?
Yeah, with the probably the associated build out and
Well, even just I can't remember what we paid, but the roaster, let's say the roaster's 50 or 60. This is for if we're basing it on what we have, the San Franciscan 25 or 75 pounder, essentially.
but that's a 75 pounder. You're getting up into like 150 to 150K.
Oh, was a smaller one?
The 15 kilo, the 25 pound was
Okay.
like 55K.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
And then, I can't remember how much it was for just the stack, because that's not included.
Right,
just
yeah.
to take it all the way up to however high your roof is.
Yep.
And I just don't see how you're spending less than 75, 100 for even a small roaster.
Yeah. makes
Unless
sense.
you're doing,
all the work yourself.
or you have some sort of weird which I don't understand, or people do like the 5 kilo thing,
Yeah.
which I
Spending
understand.
a lot of batches.
It's just a lot of time,
Right,
effort,
especially
and
time
energy.
work,
You're just
yeah.
basically trading labor, which I understand. I think Evan was going to do that at Calavera.
Yeah, he had a
RIP,
smaller one.
He had a smaller one, and I'm just like, damn, dude, you're just allocating your whole entire life to roasting coffee.
Yeah, or someone's
Entire life to roasting coffee. Yeah.
So I mean, that was the first part, right? It was just like kind of the setup. And then, then you mentioned he was talking about kind of how to structure like a wholesale. I don't know, do you want to talk about like wholesale at all, or you just want to?
I'm kind of feeling like if we take it in the same way that we take a cafe. So there's because when you do a real good job in the P&Ls, but when you're looking at the roastery, there's basically the roastery's got its own cost of goods that it's got to manage.
Yep.
Right. And those come in the form of, it's like, I mean, coffee's obviously a huge one, but then you've got all bags, stickers, labels, boxes, everything associated with packing and shipping.
Yep.
And then the roastery has its own labor metrics. So for X amount of poundage, you want X amount of labor equates to X amount of pounds. And you don't want to go over or under, just like a cafe where, if you're doing a $5,000 day, that takes this many people to do that.
Yep.
And then there is, we can talk about wholesale because the different.
Well, I mean, the one thing I would mention on like how you're kind of structuring it is just in the vein of how there's a couple different models in terms of how you're selling coffee. So basically, for us and a lot of other companies I know, is like you're essentially separating out your like wholesale department as and the roastery as its like own department,
right?
Which is buying the coffee, and then that department is selling coffee to either your own cafes or to your partners, your wholesale partners. Right. So, so it's like we've got lines on our wholesale P&L where one of the line items are the sales to our partners, right, in the partner program. And then a separate line is the coffee that we're selling to our cafes.
Right. But our cafes do pay full wholesale price for that coffee. And not everybody does it that way. There's different ways to structure it. So you can make your cafes appear to be more profitable than they actually are if you pass through coffee or sell it at a deeply discounted rate. But for us, we're trying to essentially make every department should be able to produce its own revenue and exist on its own.
Yeah, be sustainable.
Yeah, so if we took away the roastery and we had to buy wholesale coffee from somewhere else, the cafes would still make sense.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And so so I think that's just and again, just on that note, right? It's like anytime you're selling something from one department to another department, it's kind of an intercompany transaction. It's like at the end of the year, those transactions will be offset, for like income, for tax purposes. You'll kind of do some journal entries to remove those like intercompany transactions so that your revenue's not higher, right? If you're selling things to yourself, you don't want to make sure your revenue's not higher than it, than it actually is.
Right, because you're going to get taxed on all that.
Well, you get taxed on the income, but just in terms of showing, what the actual maybe revenue is outside, like from your company to outside companies, your internal revenue would be offset.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. So when you're looking at these kind of key metrics, I know none of them, which is good. So I'm going to heavily rely on you in this one. I spent a lot of time in the roastery when we were first open, but the first few years, like when I was in there, we didn't have all these magical systems. So when we first opened, it was more of a obscenely just basic functions thing, which is cool. We have to make sure all of the coffee that we need for the cafe gets roasted, so we're never without coffee. We have a small amount of coffee that we're selling on the web store, and then probably less than a handful of wholesale accounts. Some of them pretty decent size, but in the first year, and then that was kind of slowly ramping up every year after. Companion was our biggest. Andre! Dude, former roastery team leader Andre just getting his final paycheck coffee. I just can't understand how I feel right now. Wow. Oh my gosh, dude. Have a nice life. Oh. He's around the neighborhood. We're gonna see him.
Yeah.
But yeah, Companion was our first large wholesale account, so they're in that over 100 pounds a week kind of range. But we weren't really, because I was roasting a lot of coffee, and then we had Jason in there, and everybody else was kind of transient, like in and out.
Yeah.
We didn't really have
Wearing a lot of hats.
Yeah, we didn't have these labor metrics. We weren't a fully fledged department yet.
Yeah, and I mean that's kind of what I would say in the cost of goods. For us, we really want. So again, with a number of these things, it's for under certain accounting systems, your cost of goods will include the cost of all of the things that you sell, as well as the labor that is required to produce those things. But for us, we like to look at it where the cost of goods, because we want to really dial in to the margins just on the goods we sell. We actually pull our labor out and make it its own line item so that we can really focus in on like the metrics of making sure the cost of goods of the coffee we sell is a certain margin, and also that our labor is looked at with the same scrutiny, and so that they've got metrics around that exact labor number as well. So some people will include labor in their cost of goods. We pull it out and make it its own separate line item so that we just have a greater clarity around the margin on the goods and the percentage of labor.
Just making it a little less vague than seeing this one big cost of goods number.
And to simplify,
just forces you to look at it, right?
It forces you to look at it. It makes it really, really simple to just pull it out and have two very distinct numbers to look at versus trying to pull it out later. So that's the first thing I'd say. And then like you mentioned earlier, it's like you're gonna have goals around maybe percentages of revenue for your packaging, for your shipping, and those are kind of going to depend on like what you use for each of those.
Like where are we
items.
at, for example?
Yep.
For a Hemplo.
Yeah, so I'd say from like a gross profit, a gross margin, just looking at the coffee we sell, it's coffee, it's equipment is in there, merchandise we sell is in there. But just looking at those factors, and actually, again, this is a good point. We pull out packaging. Shipping is an expense line item. So we look at our cost of goods really tight to the margin on the actual coffee that we're selling. And again, we have different buckets, right? It's like we've got a target margin for, right? You could be selling to distributors, right? And your margin is going to be 30-40%.
So that would be for us, like Wisha and grocery, yeah,
things like that, right? As because that distributor, that middleman is taking, they're taking their 25-30% plus, all the way up to, almost, potentially up to almost double that for depending on how you're pricing your coffee. And again, this is something that every business is kind of going to take into account, is like, if you have competitive advantages in terms of you have all the things we don't. You have cheap land,
cheap
maybe
labor.
You have relatively cheaper labor, right? These are all going to be advantages in terms of thinking about how you price your coffee and how your coffee is priced within the competitive landscape that is specialty coffee, because I think that is a really important aspect of this, and that we compete with people all across the U.S. who have who pay vastly different prices for rent and for wages.
Right, but the end product cost almost ends up being the same in all cases. Would you agree with that? It's when I shop comps or even talk to people on the opposite coast or middle America, their cost of 10, 12 or a pound of coffee or even in their retail stores for a cappuccino or a latte don't seem vastly different than
Well,
ours.
why do you think that is?
Why do I think that is? Because I think that if you're operating in a market, people can see the value of the goods in that market. And I don't think the perceived value of those goods fluctuates depending on the locale and how much money people may or may not make or what they cost to live. So I think it's multiple levels. Like you're sending a message, if a specialty coffee cappuccino, let's say, like
I like a cappuccino.
if a cappuccino costs $5, so what's a cappuccino cost in our stores? I get a great discount at Cat and Cloud, so I don't even know what a cappuccino costs in our stores. But let's say if a cappuccino costs $5, and then you go to some place that is a specialty coffee shop, and a cappuccino's $2 or $2.50, from the guest perspective, part of you is like, well, why? Right? Like this is supposed to be a premium experience. How can it possibly be so cheap? When I see the people that are at the top of their game, all these, they don't even have to be bigger companies. They could be popular companies, industry darlings, or people who are kind of paving the way, have cappuccinos that are $5, and your brain starts to fill in the gaps. Is this not as good? Is this not actually a specialty coffee shop? Why aren't I being charged more?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I can see that in the same way that I shop for everything that I buy. Like if I'm shopping for, car parts, so if I'm building an engine or doing something and I need these pieces, and everything that looks like it's in the genre of what I want, right? I'm shopping for pistons because I did this recently. Building an engine, shopping for pistons. I'm talking to my machine shop guy, and what kind of pistons do I want? And there's a small window of something, let's say like a nice set of forged pistons for this B18 is around, $700, give or take $50 either way. And then I see a set for 300. I'm like, that can't be good. I don't know how they're made. I don't know where they're forged. I don't know where they're machined or anything, but my brain's just like, nope, this is not what I'm after. I want something good, and something that costs half the price of this is just not it. So I think that's part of it.
Yeah.
And I think the other part of it, probably depending on where you are, is, I think that's especially true for, let me backtrack a little bit, that like average market price is especially true somewhere like where we are here in Santa Cruz. So in terms of wholesale and in terms of retail, you could throw a stone either which way. I can see the 11th Hour Roastery. It's right over there. They have a cafe right across the street. Verve is 2 blocks away. Companion is a block over. There's a plethora of market comps that are operating in the same space that we are, quote unquote space, as far as a lot of people are concerned, just high-end specialty coffee, So if you're setting wholesale prices or retail prices, you kind of got to be close to where the game is. It's easy for people to see. Maybe if you have somewhere where there's lower cost of living, there's less specialty coffee, people still are aware of what the greater market demands, and you might be insulated because you might be the only game in town. If you're in, I don't know where these places are, But yeah, that's my gut feeling on it.
Yep.
My gut feeling is that you just can't price that much lower without raising these flags of like, what? Why?
Yeah. That makes sense.
I mean, what do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think again, you want to be competitive with the people immediately around you, but I also think it's really interesting to think about how people price their like wholesale coffee like on a nationwide basis, where I feel like there is like more variability than you'll get, say, for a cappuccino, like in a neighborhood where comps are like readily available and everybody's kind of maybe in a similar place in the neighborhood. But like nationwide, it's interesting to see that, like you said, that people still kind of bunch together, even though it's like if you did have some kind of competitive advantage and you thought you could use that to either that you're like take like Onyx, right? They're anchored. They're always. It seems like they're always going to be anchored at like the high end of the market.
Yep, that makes sense.
Just based on.
I mean, I haven't comped their prices, so I don't actually know, but it seems like it. That's my impression of them. Yeah.
Based on likely again how much their coffee costs, how much their packaging costs. But again, them being in Arkansas, they're going to have relatively less expensive labor, relatively less expensive rents, relatively less expensive costs of living. So it's there's probably could be similar other specialty places in that part of the country which are able to price more competitively. And then it just comes down to what the customer or the guest wants. Like, do they want a premium top-end experience and want to pay for it, or do they want something that they feel like they're getting more value for what they're paying for?
I'm just having a hard time wrapping my head around or thinking of an example of who is a value-driven specialty coffee provider, just because it seems like everything's just so similar in cost. I can't think of one. And then even when we're in this business dining space, or business dining is a great example where we're almost never competing on price.
Right.
I mean, these places have a ton of money, so that's probably part of it, and they have a budget that they're going to spend no matter what, but it's not, the conversation isn't really about price. It's more about the perceived value of the brand and the service and the experience you're going to bring to the table, and that is the differentiator there. But then there are some things that I mean, we were looking at selling coffee on Amazon and looking at what that would take. And when I see Stumptown selling coffee on Amazon for $12, I don't even understand how that works. So my brain's just like, okay, cool. They're part of a bigger holding company.
Kind of
like it's just there. Maybe they're roasting that stuff in the same, they're sharing the roastery. Not too different than what we talked about in the, was it Fairwave? Episode where they're them, Intelligentsia, Pete's, they have access to all this distribution and can kind of pool some labor. Maybe that's what's happening, and you can get Stumptown on Amazon for $12, which is crazy to me. I don't understand it. I don't know.
But maybe it's almost fits into part of their like marketing budget. At some point, like if you're not making money on it and you're essentially maybe like breaking even or losing a little bit, it's more just like brand awareness.
They're just paying for a billboard. They're paying for a billboard on Amazon. It's advertising. It's really interesting. Because I imagine if Big Daddy Ben sets up his roastery, and then he's moving into this wholesale space.
And I mean, I think part of that goes to then like how you look at pricing. But again, for most of the pricing, it's generally pretty similar across like a number of different products. Like it has to work for your business, but often you see that things are priced in the most simplistic manner. Some people are just like, cool, it cost me this, I'm gonna double it, that gives me like a 50% margin. Cool, let's look at like what our other margins look like in terms of labor being 20 to 25%, in terms of packaging being, rent being a few percent. Let's see, packaging. He asked about packaging, or we talked about packaging and shipping, what we're packaging and shipping. Where that's maybe in that like 8 to 10% of sales. But then again, we break a lot of it down. You talk about, I think he asked about goals. It's like we break a lot of those numbers down into like per pound. What's your labor cost per pound? What's your shipping cost per pound? What's your packaging cost per pound? And then having like a range that works for your business model and managing that number within that range.
Right. Totally makes sense.
Right. Because again, at the end of the day, you've got to price it at a way that gives you, let's just say you're pricing it at $1. If your gross margin's in that 50 to 60% range, right? Let's say you've got 60 cents after, after your product costs, You've got 25% labor, right? You're down to like 35%. You've got 10% packaging. You're down to 25%. You can just keep going down the line to, you've got some rent and some other, costs in there. But that'll just help you kind of figure out what your business model looks like and what a sustainable business model looks like for your wholesale department. And then breaking those down, I think it is really helpful to break labor, shipping, packaging into per pound, because that's really the unit that you're kind of measuring against, the unit that's going to be variable, and you want to manage those costs relative to how much product per pound is going out the door.
Yep, that absolutely makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean,
and that's what we've had to. I don't want to cut you off, but just to add more is like we've had to do that because we had a 1-year contract last year with like a big customer, so it's like all of our numbers went up, but knowing that we have times when those that was going to roll off, right? It's like we have to kind of resize things to make sure we're still within the range of what's sustainable with our business. So, right, we have to ramp up if we have these kind of one-time events, and then we kind of have to ramp back down to ensure that that everything stays sustainable, and plan for that, right? So you're not reacting, all that stuff ahead of time, but manage it up and manage it down, as it goes each way.
Right. Yep, that totally makes sense. And it feels like, you tell me what you think about this. It feels like in the beginning stages, when you're talking about P&Ls and finances, and you've got a cafe and you got a roastery, that the cafe is the trickier one. Am I right about that? It seems like it's a more dynamic.
Yeah, the cafe, you mean from a P&L
perspective? From a P&L, like managing the P&L perspective.
I think there's more moving parts.
To it.
And you have less margin of error in a cafe because it's just inherently like a cost, like a labor heavy. It's just like a less productive.
Right, it's a lower
from like
margin
economic
business.
point of view. It's a lower margin, less productive business model than selling wholesale coffee.
Right.
But it's like but oftentimes you need the retail footprint to be able, that often like feeds from like a marketing point of view your wholesale business, right? So it's like to a certain extent, I think if you only had a wholesale business, you may have a harder time growing it than if you have cafes, even if the cafes are lower margin.
I think so, especially if you're trying to sell to other cafes, having some sort of proof of concept where it's like, this is a shining star example of what you can do with these things that we create. I think that is super powerful.
Yeah, even to the extent of like, I know there's companies that have essentially cafes that break even, and they use those cafes and they run them break even that's what helps them grow their wholesale.
Right, because the biggest part of having a successful wholesale or partner program isn't how can I get the P&L dialed in, but it's why is it compelling for people to bring my coffee into their stores? That is the trickier part. And that's really what the uphill battle is going to be, because dude, there's good coffee everywhere. If people are looking for specialty coffee to fill their shelves with and put in their espresso machine, it's great. You're one of thousands of people that people can pick from.
Buried the lead on that like it doesn't matter what your P&L looks like when you're in an incredibly competitive business and space where there's over 3,000, 4,000 coffee roasters in the United States, and so it's just such a competitive business,
and you're competing on different things at different times too. It's just like we've been in this long enough to see flavor of the week roasters come in, come out. There's different darlings of specialty coffee in different eras. There's, certain brands that have more magnetism at certain times. But back to what you were saying about the cafe is that one of the things that I think is attractive for us in that wholesale space is that if we're selling coffee to someone else who has cafes, someone's going to consider us. It's awesome for them to see that we do this ourselves, and we do a really good job of it.
Yep.
And we're willing to share all of that information of like how to operate a really successful, super high volume cafe that still feels good, and the employees enjoy the culture, that like the team feels good about it. It's not that it's easy. It's definitely hard.
Yeah.
I think that's a gigantic selling point for us.
Yeah.
And a lot of the things we're doing, whether it's guest service focus or, I have a lot of conversations about leadership, especially post SCA. People that come in see the things that they're doing. They're like, oh, I want that, and I want to learn how to do that.
Yep.
If you take it's Swift Street's right next door to us, for example, it hums and it cranks. It does volume, and I'm not in there doing things every day. You're not in there doing things every day. Jared's not in there doing things every day. We have a leadership team that runs that cafe with our support.
Yep.
We're pointing people in a direction, but it does what it needs to do. And I think that's a dream of a lot of business owners, especially if they want to get to a certain scale. Like, how do I build a team around me that I can count on, that can help me, push forward, and I just don't have to be super stressed out all the time managing every little detail. And a lot of people don't get there, but I really think we're not the only ones, because
that's a whole nother podcast about like reverse engineering the growth you want to have to grow your company to a size where you're not involved in the day-to-day, right? That's the next podcast.
But I think one of our strengths in that is like, we're not the only organization that does that, but I think we are one of very few specialty coffee companies that do that. And we took a lot of inspiration from outside the specialty coffee industry. So we knew we wanted to be at the top of this specialty coffee game, but you saw it from, when we started. It's like, what are we going to do? Okay, cool. Like, before we're even opening, we're allocating funds and energy to, like, we're going to go to the Disney Institute and try to figure out this thing, or we're going to do some work outside of just simply roasting delicious coffee, which is not enough to be successful. It's just not. And figure out how to create this culture that we want to create. It's a lot of work, effort, and energy, but it's compelling. And those are the things that are enjoyable to help other people with.
Yeah.
We've got culture coming in this month at some point. Jamie's bringing a group of her
Culture
employees,
Coffee.
Culture Coffee, yep, in my hometown, Modesto. Big shout out.
Yeah. Because again, that's just what you go to. It's like, and for Ben, like looking to like start his roastery, there may be some like low hanging fruit of like places to sell to that are local to him, but to really grow it beyond that, people are going to, you're going to ask yourself like, people are going to ask yourself like, why do we want to work with you?
Yep. What are you providing that I can't get anywhere else?
Yeah.
And everybody has their own special sauce. What's yours?
Yeah.
Like, getting really clear about what that is and just being able to communicate it. Because I think one of the Achilles heels of being specialty coffee roaster or specialty coffee company is that they're started by all these really passionate people who love coffee, to the moon. But that's the end of what they can articulate, where it's like, what are you guys all about? It's like, I just like really love high quality coffee. This is like sourcing direct coffee. And it just, at some point there's fatigue, if you're shopping around for roasters. It's like, great, I got 30 people saying the same thing. I literally can't tell why you're different than the next guy. So figure that out, because there is something,
everybody has something.
Everybody has something. I think it's there. And I think a couple reasons why that never makes it out, let's call it to the market, so to speak, is that it's easy to get shy or be embarrassed about the thing that you're really passionate about, because once you put your heart on your sleeve, so to speak, you kind of gotta walk the walk, talk the talk, and it's like a line in the stand. It's like, this is what I'm gonna do, this is what I promised to do, and you really have to live up to that promise. And if people don't resonate with that, you have to be okay with people saying, you're not for me. But that is a better place to be than just being like, well, I'm just kind of like everybody else.
You're just a wine bottle on a shelf and people are choosing like which label they like.
Yeah, you're just boilerplate like industry speak, and we all know what that is. So what makes you unique?
Because there might be people, there will be people that say like, that doesn't resonate with me, but it's like there will also be the people when you put your heart on your sleeve that say that is what
That's
resonates.
exactly
That's
what I want.
exactly what I want.
Mhm. That's exactly what I've been looking for. And that's the place to be. It's in this market, you do not want to be average.
Yeah.
You want to be, I mean, polarizing is an interesting
You wanna be
word, but
authentic.
you want to be authentic, but by being authentic and choosing a lane, you're most certainly setting yourself up for being rejected by some people. And
Sure.
that's great. That's fine. That's okay. You know, that's what you want, because you're not going to have everybody as your partner. You know, you're not going to have, same thing with employees in the store. Like not everyone's a great fit to be a Cat and Cloud team member. It's just not. It's like, if you want a super chill, easy job, this is really not a great place for you to be, you know? So yeah, I think that's really the hard work to do, figure out the P&L, because it's going to be, if you can create that framework that you're talking about and set up a clean way to manage it. I mean, we see this in the industry. It's like half the people we know are getting bags from the same company,
Right.
you know, half the, like, shipping labels, all that stuff kind of comes from one of several providers. You know, everybody's got their Uline account on speed dial, right? You know, there's not too many places to get this stuff. So that'll be easy to figure out, and then figure out who you're talking to, what you want to do, what kind of change you want to make in the world. Why is the world a better place? Because you decided to have a wholesale program, and you wanting to sell coffee is not good enough.
Right. Yeah. You want to step outside of that mass of what's in the middle, and step outside and kind of
get a toe outside the box.
Get
a toe outside the box. Just creep out a little bit. Make some people really happy. Excited to see what you do.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Thanks, Ben. All right, we'll see you guys next week.
Dude, take care.
Peace.
Hey everyone, that's the podcast for the week. Thanks so much for listening. If you heard something that inspired you, or if you heard something that gave you more questions than answers, send us an email to podcast@catandcloud.com. And if you're looking to know more about us, then head to our website at catandcloud.com, where you can find everything we have to offer. A great place to start would be The Answer, our house coffee that's right for any occasion. Or the Best Friends Blend, a coffee that tastes just as good as the good it does, by donating $1 per pound back to our partnering producers. Also, if you're feeling extra friendly, connect with us in the usual places, like YouTube, Instagram, pretty much everywhere that's hip. All right, that's it. Thanks for being awesome, everyone, and we'll be back next week.